the heart of Umuzi, a prosperous kingdom known for its wealth and culture, Prince Dotun was the pride of his people. Born into royalty, he exhibited wisdom, strength, and leadership that made the elders nod in approval. His charm drew admiration from the citizens, and many believed he was destined to bring even greater glory to the kingdom. Little did they know, the seeds of greed and ambition had already begun to take root within him. Foreign traders, seeking to exploit the riches of Umuzi, whispered promises of even greater wealth in Dotun's ear. They spoke of treasures beyond imagination, of lands where he could rule with absolute power. Slowly, their words clouded the prince's judgment, and the love he once had for his people began to wither. Dotun's nights became sleepless as visions of gold, lands, and power haunted his dreams. He began distancing himself from his royal duties, neglecting the counsel of his trusted advisors. His once pure heart, which beat with love for Umuzi, now throbbed with greed and ambition. He saw the foreign invaders not as enemies but as allies who could help him achieve his desires. One fateful evening, Dotun met in secret with the invaders. They promised him control over new territories in exchange for access to Umuzi's wealth. Blinded by his greed, Dotun struck a deal that would bring destruction to his homeland, sealing people without a second thought. The ancestors of Umuzi had watched over the kingdom for generations, guiding and protecting its rulers. But as Dotun's betrayal deepened, the spirits grew restless. They whispered warnings through the winds and in the rustling leaves, but the prince's heart had grown too cold to hear their voices. He no longer prayed at the sacred shrines or sought their wisdom. The elders of the kingdom, sensing a growing unease, urged Dotun to reconnect with his ancestors. But he brushed off their pleas, confident that the foreign invaders would bring him everything he desired. His betrayal wasn't just against his people. It was against the very spirits that had safeguarded Umuzi for centuries. As the invaders grew bold, they began taking more than they had promised. Their armies marched into Umuzi, destroying villages, plundering treasures, and leaving devastation in their wake. Prince Dotun, realizing too late the consequences of his greed, tried to push them back, but the damage had already been done. His people, once proud and strong, now stood defenseless. In a final act of desperation, Dotun rode into battle. But the ancestors had turned their backs. His strength faltered, and he was captured by the invaders, who mocked him for his kingdom of Umuzi fell into ruin, and the foreign invaders claimed it as their own. The ancestors, angered by his betrayal, could not let his actions go unpunished. As he lay bound in the village square, they appeared to him in his final moments. "You have betrayed your blood, your people, and us," they spoke through the wind. "For this, your heart shall turn cold, and your body shall harden into stone. You will stand here unmoved until the day you truly repent for your crimes." As the curse took hold, Dotun felt his heart grow heavy, colder than ice. His skin began to harden, first then climbing up his legs until his entire body had turned to stone. The prince was frozen in place, a monument of betrayal, forever to be gazed upon by his people. As years passed, the statue remained in the village square, weathered by the elements but never crumbling. The once glorious prince became a tale told to frighten children, an example of what greed and betrayal could do to a leader. People of Umuzi slowly rebuilt their lives, but the kingdom would never be as prosperous as it once was. The descendants of the original citizens of Umuzi grew accustomed to the sight of the stone prince, past a second glance. His once heroic deeds were forgotten, replaced by the memory of his betrayal. Yet within the stone, Dotun's spirit remained trapped, aware of the passage of time and the scorn of his people. Later, the curse that had held Prince Dotun captive in stone showed no sign of weakening. But the ancestors had not forgotten him. In a small village, far from the ruins of the old kingdom, a young man named Kalechi began to have strange dreams. In his sleep, he saw flashes of the past, war, betrayal, and a prince trapped in stone. The visions haunted Kalechi, who had no knowledge of his ancestral connection to Dotun. His nights were filled with cries for help, and each morning he woke with a growing sense of urgency. Though he had never traveled far from his home, Kalechi felt a pull in the kingdom of Umuzi. Kalechi sought the advice of his village elders, who listened carefully to his dreams. They believed he was being called by the ancestors for a purpose, though they did not yet know why. The visions were powerful, urged Kalechi to follow them to the ruins of Umuzi, where he would find answers. Reluctantly, Kalechi agreed. Armed with nothing more than his resolve, he set out on a journey toward the forgotten kingdom. His heart was dread and curiosity, unsure of what he would find. His arrival in Umuzi would begin a chain of events that would change the course of his life, and the fate of the prince. After days of travel, Kalechi arrived at the outskirts of the ancient kingdom. The once great city was now a collection of crumbled buildings and overgrown. The air was thick with the weight of history, and as he stepped forward, Kalechi could feel the presence of the ancestors watching him. In the center of the village square, standing alone amidst the decay, was the statue of Prince Dotun. Though it had weathered centuries of time, the stone figure remained lifelike, frozen in a moment of eternal regret. Kalechi stared at it, his heart racing. This was the man from his visions, the prince who had betrayed his people. As Kalechi stood before the statue, he felt it in the air. The ancestors, unseen but present, whispered to him, revealing the truth of Dotun's betrayal. The prince had once been a man of great promise, but his greed had led to the downfall of the kingdom. For his treachery, he was cursed to remain in stone until he could repent. As Kalechi pondered the curse, he felt an overwhelming wash over him. The ancestors' whispers had left him with a deep sense of loss, not just for Prince Dotun, but for the entire Umuzi. The weight of the betrayal lingered in the air, a palpable force that clung to the ruins. Every stone, every decaying building seemed to carry the memory of Dotun's greed. Kalechi wondered how a man so loved could have fallen so far. He could feel the ancestors' anger and disappointment, but also a hint of sorrow. Perhaps they had not wanted to curse Dotun, but had no other choice. Kalechi knew he had to learn more about the events that led to the prince's betrayal if he was ever to help break the curse. The elder had told Kalechi about a sacred shrine located deep in the forest near Umuzi. It was the ancestors would communicate with the living more clearly there, away from the distractions of the mortal world. Kelechi decided this was his next step. The ancestors had answers found at the shrine. The journey to the shrine was treacherous, with dense forest and wild animals making a challenge. But Kelechi was determined. His mind set on unraveling the mystery of Dotun's curse. After hours of navigating the thick forest, he arrived at the shrine, an ancient structure made of stone, hidden by vines and thyme. Kelechi knelt before the shrine, closing his eyes and letting the presence of the ancestors surround him. There was only silence, but slowly a soft hum filled the air. The whispers of the ancestors, and soon their voices filled his mind, each one echoing with the weight of centuries. "You are the one who will carry our message," the ancestors spoke as one. "The curse can only end by truth. Seek the true heart of the prince, and you will find the path to redemption." Were cryptic, but Kelechi understood that he needed to look deeper into the events that had led to Dotun's fall from grace. Back in the village, Kelechi sought out an elder to read the history of Umuzi in great detail. The elder was a reclusive figure, known to spend his days with ancient scrolls and manuscripts, piecing together the fragments of the kingdom. If anyone knew the true history of Prince Dotun, it would be him. They welcomed Kelechi, intrigued by his dreams and his connection to the earth. Together they pored over old texts, some barely legible details that had led to the war and the prince's betrayal. Slowly, a clearer picture began to emerge, one that painted Dotun not just as a villain but as a man caught in the web of fate. Dotun had been with a heart of greed. In his youth, he had been a noble prince, beloved by his people and guided by the ancestors. But power is a dangerous thing, and as Dotun grew older, he desired more than what was his. The foreign invaders had recognized this weakness and used it to manipulate him. They had promised Dotun the power to rule beyond the borders of Umuzi, to conquer lands that would rival the greatest kingdoms. Blinded by these promises, Dotun had made a fateful decision, abandoning his duties as prince in pursuit of power. But the promises were hollow, and in the end it was his people who paid the price. Once the invaders had gained control of Umuzi, they showed their true colors. They plundered the kingdom's wealth, enslaved its people, and left the land barren. Dotun, realizing too late that he had been used, tried to fight back, but his once loyal soldiers had lost faith in him. Kingdom crumbled, and the once glorious city of Umuzi was left in ruins. The few survivors fled to neighboring lands, and over time the memory of the kingdom faded into legend. Only the curse of the prince remained, a grim reminder of the cost of greed. Kelechi left the elder's home with a heavy heart. He now understood the depth of Dotun's betrayal, but he also saw the prince's humanity. Dotun had been a flawed man, tempted by power and blinded by ambition. But could that justify the suffering caused? Could repentance truly undo the damage? Kelechi began to see that this journey was not just about freeing Dotun from his curse, but about understanding the burden of legacy. As a descendant of the prince, Kelechi carried that burden too. The ancestors had chosen him not only truth, but to heal the wounds that had been passed down through generations. On his way back to the ruins of Umuzi, Kelechi encountered a mysterious stranger. The man was cloaked in shadows, his face hidden by a hood. He spoke in a low, his words carrying an air of warning. You seek the truth of Prince Dotun, but be careful what you uncover. Truths are meant to be revealed. Kelechi was taken aback by the stranger's words. How did he know of his quest? And why did he speak of hidden truths? Before Kelechi could ask more, the man disappeared into the trees, leaving only questions in his wake. His warning echoed in Kelechi's mind, casting a shadow over his. When Kelechi returned to the ruins, he found the air heavy with tension. The ants seemed restless, their whispers more urgent than before. As he approached the station, he felt a sudden chill, as though the spirit of the prince was trying to communicate with him. Kelechi, the stone figure, closing his eyes and listening to the wind. Slowly, the voice of Prince Dotun came through. I was wrong, the spirit lamented. But the truth is deeper than what you've been told. Find my heart and you will find the key to breaking the curse. Dotun's words haunted Kelechi as he began his part of the prince. What did the spirit mean? Was it a metaphor, or was there something more literal hidden within the ruins? Ancestors had spoken of truth, but now Dotun was asking him to find his heart. Path to redemption was becoming more complex than Kelechi had anticipated. Determined to find the answers, Kelechi set out once again, exploring every corner of the ruined kingdom in search of the curse. The journey was far from over, and Kelechi could feel the weight of the ancestors move, waiting to see if he would succeed where so many had failed. Kelechi's search for Prince Dotun's heart took him deeper into the ruins of Umuzi than he had ever imagined. One afternoon, as he wandered through a crumbling temple at the far edge of the village, he discovered a series of stone steps leading underground. Covered in vines and moss, they seemed untouched for centuries. Something about the air in this chamber felt different, heavier, as if it held the weight of untold secrets. As he descended, the whispers of the ancestors became louder, guiding him forward. The stone walls around him were adorned with carvings depicting the history of Umuzi. At the center of it all was Prince Dotun. It was as if the earth itself held the truth of his betrayal. Bottom of the steps, Kelechi entered a vast, dimly lit chamber. In the center was an ancient tomb covered in thick stone slabs. Carvings on the tomb were more intricate than those above, detailing scenes of Dotun's rise to power, his downfall, and his ultimate fate. He approached cautiously, his heart pounding in his chest. Could this be what the prince meant by finding his heart? As he stood before the tomb, the voice of Prince Dotun came to him once more. Beneath this stone lies the truth of my heart, the spirit whispered. But beware, once it is uncovered, there is no back. Kelechi hesitated, but his resolve was firm. Whatever the truth was, it had to be revealed. With a deep breath, Kelechi placed his hands on the cold stone and began to push. The heavy slab groaned under his efforts, but with the strength of his ancestors behind him, to slide it aside. Inside the tomb, instead of a body, he found a small stone chest. It was sealed shut, its surface etched with ancient symbols of protection. As Kelechi reached for the chest, a sudden wave of cold energy washed over him, as though the very air around him of the consequences. He opened with trembling hands, revealing a heart-shaped stone, smooth, cold, and gray. This, Kelechi realized, was the literal embodiment of Prince Dotun's heart, hardened and petrified by the curse. But there was more, something deeper that still remained hidden. The moment Kelechi touched the stone heart, heart. A loud thumping sound filled the chamber like the beating of a drum. The stone heart pulsed once, twice, and then the chamber shook violently. Kelechi stumbled backward, clutching the heart in his hands as cracks formed in the walls and ceiling. Visions flooded Kelechi's mind. He saw flashes of Dotun's life. The moment he struck the deal with the invaders, the guilt that gnawed at him afterward, and the day the curse took hold. But there was more. In one vision, Kelechi saw a secret, something no one had ever known. Dotun had not acted alone. There had been another force influencing his decision, a hidden power manipulating events from the shadows. Kelechi reeled from the shock of the vision. Someone had been pulling the strings behind Dotun's betrayal, an unseen hand that had guided the prince toward his downfall. This revelation changed everything. The ancestors had cursed Dotun for his actions, but had they known the full truth? Had he truly been the sole architect of his kingdom's destruction? The stone heart pulsed again in Kelechi's hands, and for a moment he thought he heard the faintest echo of a heartbeat. Could the prince still be capable of feeling after all this time? And if Dotun had been manipulated, could this change the terms of his curse? Kelechi knew he had to return to the surface and seek answers. Emerging from the tomb, Kelechi felt the weight of his discovery heavily on his shoulders. The ancestors had been guiding him toward the truth, but why had they not revealed the full story before? Was this dark influence still at work in the world, perhaps kingdom's ruins? Kelechi needed guidance, but the ancestors were silent now, as though they were waiting for the next move. Back at the statue of Prince Dotun, Kelechi saw the stone figure, holding the heart in his hands. "I have found your heart," he whispered. "But the truth is more complicated than we thought, isn't it?" The wind stirred around him, but the prince's voice did not come. The spirit was waiting too, it seemed, waiting for Kelechi to take the next step toward unraveling the full mystery. For the first time since his journey began, he felt truly alone. The ancestors had always been him, guiding his actions, but now their voices had grown faint, distant. Kelechi realized that this was his trial. He had uncovered a piece of the truth, but now he needed to feel worthy of understanding the rest. With the stone heart in hand, Kelechi returned to the village elder. He explained what he had found in the tomb and shared the visions that had shown him the hidden influence behind Dotun's betrayal. The elder listened carefully, his face growing more serious with each passing word. "There are forces older than the ancestors," the elder said at last. "And darker. What you have uncovered may be a threat greater than we ever imagined." The elder's words filled Kelechi with unease. There was a power greater than the ancestors, one that had influenced Prince Dotun's actions. It could still pose a danger to the world. The elder advised Kelechi to be cautious as he continued his journey, for the forces at play were not to be taken lightly. But Kelechi's resolve was firm. He would see this journey through no matter the cost. As Kelechi prepared to return to the ruins, the skies above darkened. A storm was gathering, both in the physical world and in the spiritual realm. Kelechi could feel the tension building, as though the forces he had uncovered were growing restless. He knew he had to act quickly before the storm unleashed chaos on the world. Kelechi's steps quickened as he made his way back to the ruins. He could feel the presence of something dark, something malevolent, lurking just beyond his This was the hidden force that had influenced Dotun, and it was not pleased that Kalechi had uncovered its secrets. As he saw the statue of the prince once more, he saw a figure standing in the shadows. The figure was tall and cloaked in darkness, its face hidden. Kalechi's heart raced as he realized this must be the entity that had guided Dotun to his doom. "You should have stayed ignorant," the figure said, its voice like a hiss on the wind. "The truth will bring you nothing but suffering." Kalechi stood his ground, clutching the stone heart. "I seek the truth no matter the cost," he replied. The dark figure laughed, a cold and hollow sound that echoed through the ruins. "Then you will face the same fate as Dotun," it said, raising its hand. A wave of darkness surged toward Kalechi, but he held up the stone heart, its faint pulse growing stronger. The darkness recoiled, as if the heart held a power that the entity could not touch. Kalechi realized that the heart was not just a symbol of Dotun's curse, it was also a weapon. Prince's spirit was still trapped within the stone, but his will had not been broken. With the heart in his hands, Kalechi felt a surge of strength. "Dotun's story isn't over yet," he said, and snarled, retreating into the shadows. The battle had just begun. Through the entity's retreat comes silence, clutching the stone heart tightly. The air around him was thick with tension, and though the immediate threat had passed, he knew it would return. Looking at the statue of Prince Dotun, Kalechi felt a new understanding. The prince had not entirely to blame for the kingdom's fall. There had been darker forces, but he had still allowed himself to be corrupted. Kneeling before the stone figure, Kalechi placed the statue's feet, hoping to connect with Dotun's spirit once more. "I know you're trapped," he whispered. "I also know you want to be free. Show me the way. Show me how to end this." The wind stirred slightly, but no voice responded. The prince's soul remained silent, burdened by centuries of guilt. Kalechi left the room, thoughts spinning. He had uncovered so much, yet there was still more to learn. As he walked back to the village, he felt a presence following him. First he tensed, fearing the dark entity had, but when he turned around, he saw a figure draped in a brilliant cloak of vibrant colors, with eyes that glowed faintly in the dusk. Woman, her appearance otherworldly. "I've been watching you," she said softly, her voice carrying a strange melodic tone. "You've uncovered truths that many have sought but few have found. But the path's dangerous, and you'll need guidance." Though surprised by her sudden appearance, sensed no threat from her. "Who are you?" he asked cautiously. "I am a messenger of the ancestors," she replied. "And I am here to help you free Prince Dotun's soul." The woman introduced herself as Edora, spiritual guide sent by the ancestors. She explained that the ancestors had watched Kalechi with great interest, and that he had proven himself worthy of their trust. However, breaking the curse on Dotun was far more complicated than simply finding the truth. The entity that had influenced the prince still had power over the land, and it would not let go without a fight. Edora revealed that the stone heart Kalechi had found was only part of the key to freedom. Prince's spirit was fractured, his will divided between regret and his guilt. In order to fully break the curse, Kelechi would need to restore Dotun's soul by facing the forces that had driven him and that meant confronting the dark entity once and for all. Kelechi listened intently as Edaora spoke of his journey. To truly understand the depth of Dotun's regret and the dark forces that had driven him to ruin, Kelechi would have to enter the spirit world, a realm that existed beyond the physical, where the ancestors resided and where the roots. It was there that Kelechi could confront the dark entity directly and reclaim the lost fragments of Dotun's soul. But entering the spirit world came with risks. The line between the living and the dead was thin, and many who ventured into the spiritual realm never returned. "You must have absolved," Edaora warned. "The spirit world will test your mind and your soul. Only those who walk with a pure heart can hope." Before Kelechi could enter the spirit world, he needed to undergo a sacred ritual to prepare his body and mind for the journey. Edaora led grove deep within the forest, where the ancestors' presence was strongest. There she performed an ancient ceremony, invoking the spirits and asking for their protection. Kelechi stood in the center of the grove, surrounded by the faint glow of ancestral energy, his heart with anticipation. As the ritual started, Kelechi felt a strange sensation wash over him, as though his body was becoming. The physical world around him began to fade, and the whispers of the ancestors grew louder. "Awaken," Edaora said. "You will be in the spirit world. But remember, you must face the in yourself as much as the darkness that plagues Dotun's soul." When Kelechi opened his eyes, he found himself in a world that was both familiar and foreign. The landscape around resembled the ruins of Umuzi, but everything was bathed in an ethereal light, and the boundaries between land and sky seemed to blur. The ancestors were shimmering figures that floated just beyond his reach, their faces both watchful and kind. Kelechi took a step forward, feeling a strange pull guiding him deeper into the spirit world. His senses were heightened, every sound and sight amplified, but there was also a sense of unease. Somewhere in this realm, the dark entity waited, watching, preparing to strike. But Kelechi knew he had to press on. This was the only way to free Dotun and finally put the kingdom's curse to rest. As Kelechi ventured deeper into the spirit world, he encountered a series of trials, each one testing his courage, resolve, and understanding of the past. The ancestors appeared to him in various forms, sometimes as friends, sometimes as foes. They challenged his knowledge of Dotun's betrayal, asking him to prove his understanding of the prince's downfall. In one trial, Kelechi was faced with a vision of Dotun's final moments before the curse was cast. Prince stood before the ancestors, pleading for mercy. They had turned their backs on him. Kelechi was asked to judge whether the punishment had been fair. It was a difficult question, but Kelechi answered truthfully. Dotun was wrong, but he was not beyond redemption. The next trial took Kelechi to a place where the boundaries between his spirit and Dotun's began to blur. He stood before a large, ornate mirror that reflected not his own image, but that of Prince Dotun. The prince's face was twisted in agony, and his eyes were filled with sorrow and regret. "This is what I have become," Dotun's reflection whispered. A man trapped in his own guilt. Kelechi reached out toward the mirror, his hand passing through the glass. As his fingers touched the prince's reflection, He felt a surge of pain and regret wash over him. The depth of Dotun's sorrow, a torment that had consumed him for centuries. But within that sorrow there was also a glimmer of hope. Dotun wanted to be freed, but he would alone. Just as Kalechi began to understand the true nature of Dotun's curse, the dark entity made its presence known once more. A cold wind swept through the sky, and the ethereal light began to dim. The ground beneath Kalechi's feet trembled, and the sky above him thickened. Out of the shadows emerged the entity, even more menacing than before. "You are too late," the entity hissed. "All belongs to me, and there is nothing you can do to change that." His ground, his heart racing, but his resolve stronger than ever. "Dotun belongs to the ancestors," replied, "and I will fight to reclaim it." The entity snarled, and the final battle between light and darkness, the battle between Kalechi and the dark entity, raged across the spirit world. The entity summoned illusions to confuse and weaken Kalechi, but he fought back with the power of the ancestors, their voices guiding him and filling him with strength. The stone heart that Kalechi had to the spirit world began to glow with a soft, warm light. Each pulse, the darkness around him receded. Kalechi knew that than just a physical battle, it was a battle of wills. The end of fear and doubt, and Kalechi had to stay strong in his belief that Dotun could be redeemed. Prince's heart, though hardened by guilt, still held the potential for redemption, and Kalechi determined to help him find it. As the battle raged on, Kalechi could feel the weight of the ancestors pressing behind him, their strength becoming his. The glowing stone heart grew brighter, creating a barrier of light that shielded him from the dark entity's attacks. Each pulse sent shockwaves through the spirit world, causing the shadows to retreat. But the entity fought fiercely, determined not to relinquish its hold on Dotun's soul. The ground trembled and the sky roared with thunder. Kalechi could feel him, but he held on to the belief that redemption was for Dotun. "You will him," clouded, raging stone heart above. The entity hissed, its form flickering, but it did not relent. With every fighting, Kalechi pressed forward, focusing on the one thing that could overpower the darkness, the truth. Suddenly, the battlefield, and the spirit appeared before Kalechi, his body still bound form of his eyes filled with sorrow. "I am the cause of all this," Dotun said softly, his voice a mixture of pain and regret. "I allowed the darkness into my heart, and because of that, my people suffered." Kalechi approached the prince, the glowing heart still in his hands. "You can be free, Dotun," Kalechi said. But you must confront the choice and face the truth of your. The ancestors believe in redemption." Prince looked down at his petrified hand, his expression one of torment. "I was a fool. I thought I could control, but it controlled me." Dotun's confession echoed the world. For centuries, the weight of his guilt had been. He had betrayed led them to ruin and allowed the dark entity to corrupt him. His heart had stone, but his spirit had never ceased to feel the crushing weight of what he had done. She could see the deep sorrow in Dotun's eyes. "It's not too late," he said gently. "Sister sent me here because there is still hope for you. You must first forgive your twisted in pain. Forgive my after what I've done. How can I ask of forgiveness?" The dark entity rose, watching the fish with twisted satisfaction. "You are nothing," it hissed. "Belong to me now." But collapsed between the entities, holding the as a shield. "Belong to you," firmly. "Fate lies with the ancestors." Dotun looked, his eye a mixture of hope and doubt. "My worst," he said, "the destruction I caused. How can I undo centuries of pain?" Kalechi nodded. "You can't undo the Dotun, but you can choose to be better, to repent and to seek redemption. The ancestors can help you, but first ask for their forgiveness." Tears filled Dotun's eyes as he looked at the sky. For the first time in centuries, his heart began to lift only slightly. "Ancestors," he whispered, "I have failed you. I betrayed my people, and I let darkness consume me. But I seek your forgiveness now. I am ready to face the consequences of my actions, and I beg for your mercy." As Dotun spoke, the stone heart in Kalechi's hands began to glow brighter than ever, casting a brilliant light over the entire spirit world. The dark entity shrieked and writhed, its form flickering and fading as the light grew stronger. "No!" it screamed, but the light of redemption was too powerful. The grip the entity had on Dotun's soul began to weaken. The dark entity, which had once been so powerful, began to the force of Dotun's repentance and the light of the ancestors. Fought desperately to hold on, but with every word of apology from the prince, its power waned. Kalechi stood by Dotun's side, guiding him through the process, knowing that the prince had finally found the courage to face the truth of his actions. "You do not control me anymore," Dotun said, his voice growing stronger. "I am not the man I once was, and I will no longer allow you to hold my soul captive." With one final scream, the dark entity was consumed by the light, vanishing into nothingness. The sky cleared, and the ethereal glow of the ancestors filled the spirit world once more. Kalechi watched as the curse began to lift from Dotun's body. The stone that had encased him for centuries slowly cracked and fell away, revealing the man beneath, a man who had been humbled by his mistakes but who now had a chance at redemption. Dotun's spirit, though weary, was free at last. As the last remnants of the curse fell away, the ancestors appeared before Kalechi and Dotun, their faces calm and serene. "You have faced your past, Dotun," one of the ancestors said, "and you have sought our forgiveness. Though your betrayal caused great suffering, you have shown remorse and a desire to make amends. For this, we offer you peace." Dotun bowed his head, tears streaming down his face. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice filled with gratitude and relief. "I will carry the burden of my actions for the rest of time, but knowing given by you, by my ancestors, brings me peace." Kalechi smiled, feeling the warmth of the ancestors' approval wash over him. His journey had been long and difficult, but he had helped free Dotun's soul and restore balance to the spirit world. The ancestors turned to Kalechi, their eyes filled with pride. "You have done well, Kalechi," they said. "You have proven yourself a worthy descendant of our people. The curse is broken." With the curse lifted, Kalechi felt the pull of the physical world drawing him back. The spirit world began to fade around him, and soon he found himself standing once more in the sacred grove, the stone heart still glowing softly in his hands. The wind blew gently through the sense of peace that was undeniable. Laura, the messenger of the ancestors, her face full of pride. "You did it, Kalechi," she said. "The prince is free and the dark forces have been vanquished." Kalechi nodded, his heart full of gratitude for her guidance. "I couldn't have done it without you," he replied. "Thank you for leading me through this journey." Edora smiled. "It was always your path to walk, Kalechi. I was only here to guide you. Now you have brought peace to both the spirit world and the kingdom of Umuzi." With that, Edora faded into the wind, her task complete, leaving Kalechi to reflect on all he had accomplished. Word of Kalechi's journey spread throughout the remnants of the kingdom of Umuzi. The people began to gather once more. The statue of Prince Dotun, which had stood as a symbol of betrayal and ruin for centuries, was gone. In its place stood a monument to forgiveness and redemption, a testament to the power of repentance and the wisdom of the ancestors. People of Umuzi, inspired by the story of Kalechi's journey, began to rebuild their kingdom with a renewed sense of purpose. Though the scars of the past remained, there was hope for a brighter future, one built on the lessons of forgiveness and humility. Kalechi, now revered as a hero and a spiritual guide, continued to lead his people with wisdom and compassion. Though Prince Dotun's soul had been freed, his story would never be forgotten. It became a tale passed down through generations, a reminder of the dangers of greed and the power of redemption. Kalechi made sure that the truth of Dotun's life, the good and the bad, was preserved, so that future leaders would learn from his mistakes. The ancestors watched over the kingdom with pride, knowing that their people had found peace once more. And though Kalechi's journey had been long and difficult, he knew that it had been worth it. Kingdom of Umuzi was flourishing once again, and the curse that had haunted it for centuries was finally broken. As Kalechi grew older, he continued to feel the presence of the ancestors in his life. They had guided him through his journey, and he knew they would always be with him. Each night, as he gazed up at the stars, he whispered a prayer of thanks to the spirits who had helped him free Prince Dotun and restore balance to the world. Though his journey was complete, Kalechi knew that the story of the cursed prince would live on in the hearts and minds of his people. And as long as the ancestors watched over them, the kingdom of Umuzi would remain a place of peace, wisdom, and redemption. Kingdom of Umuzi was slowly returning to its former glory. The ruins that once stood as a grim reminder of Dotun's betrayal were being rebuilt with the strength and determination of the people. A new sense of unity flowed through the kingdom, as old wounds began to heal. Under Kalechi's guidance, the kingdom embraced a future grounded in humility, wisdom, and forgiveness. Kalechi himself had grown into a beloved figure, not just as a descendant of royalty, but as a leader who had restored hope to Umuzi. He had proven that true power lay not in wealth or conquest, but in the ability to lead with a pure heart. As he walked through the bustling marketplace, he smiled at the sight of children laughing and playing, their joy a stark contrast to the shadows that once loomed over the kingdom. With the kingdom growing once more, Kalechi sought the counsel of the elders who had guided him through his journey. Together, they formed a council that would oversee the restoration of Umuzi and ensure that its future leaders remembered the lessons of the past. council would serve as a bridge between the living and the ancestors, preserving the wisdom of those who had come before. The elders were pleased with the direction Kelechi was taking the kingdom, but they knew that challenges still lay ahead. As Umuzi grew, neighboring kingdoms had begun to take notice of its resurgence, and not all of them were pleased. Council warned Kelechi that there were still forces beyond the kingdom's borders that would seek to undermine its newfound peace. As the months passed, rumors of unrest from neighboring kingdoms reached Umuzi. Some saw the rebirth of the kingdom as a threat to their own power, while others envied the wealth and strength that Umuzi had once possessed. Kelechi knew that the kingdom's growth could attract unwanted attention, but he was determined not to let Umuzi fall into the same traps of greed and ambition that had led to its downfall in the past. With the council's help, Kelechi sent emissaries to neighboring lands seeking alliances and peace treaties. He wanted to build bridges, not walls, and to show the world that Umuzi was a kingdom of compassion and wisdom. But not all kingdoms were willing to listen, and Kelechi soon found himself facing new challenges, both from within and without. Despite Kelechi's efforts to maintain peace, a shadow began to rise from the east. Kingdom of Zuberi, a powerful and war-hungry nation, had set its sights on Umuzi. King Mwamba of Zuberi saw Umuzi's restoration as a threat to his dominance, and believed that the wealth of the reborn kingdom would be better in his hands. He began to gather his armies, preparing for an invasion that would test the strength of Kelechi and his people. Kelechi, ever watchful, sensed the looming threat. The ancestors, though silent for many months, whispered warnings in his dreams. Peace that Umuzi had enjoyed was fragile, and Kelechi knew that he would soon be called upon to defend his kingdom once more. Though Kelechi had hoped to avoid conflict, he knew that peace could not always be achieved without strength. With the council's guidance, he began to prepare Umuzi for the possibility of war. People of the kingdom were taught to defend themselves, and alliances were strengthened with neighboring kingdoms that shared Umuzi's values of peace and unity. But Kelechi's heart was heavy. He did not want Umuzi to be consumed by the same forces of greed and violence that had destroyed it before. As he looked out over the kingdom, now vibrant and alive, he knew that the decisions he made in the coming months would determine the future of Umuzi for generations to come. In his darkest moments of doubt, Kelechi turned once again to the ancestors for guidance. Kneeling before the sacred shrine deep within the forest, he prayed for their wisdom and protection. The spirits, who had watched over him through his journey to free Dotun's soul, whispered softly in the wind, assuring him that they were still with him. "You have the strength to lead your people, Kelechi," they whispered. "But remember the lessons of the past. True strength does not come from the sword, but from the heart." Kelechi took their words to heart, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, he must remain true to the principles that had guided him thus far: wisdom, compassion, and the desire for peace. Despite Kelechi's efforts to maintain peace, King Mwamba of Zuberi launched his invasion of Umuzi. His armies, vast and well-equipped, descended upon the borders of the kingdom, determined to claim its wealth and glory for themselves. People of Umuzi, though trained in defense, were unprepared for the scale of the invasion. Fear gripped the kingdom as news of the advancing armies spread. Kelechi, knowing that the fate of his people rested on his shoulders, called upon the council and his allies to stand with him. "We will not allow Umuzi to fall again," he declared. "We will defend our home, not with greed and ambition, but with the strength of unity and the wisdom of the ancestors. The armies of Zuberi clashed with the defenders of Umuzi on the plains outside the kingdom. The battle was fierce, with both sides fighting for their lives and the future of their lands. Kelechi, though not a warrior by nature, led his people with courage, knowing that they were fighting not just for themselves but for the memory of those who had come before. The ancestors watched over the battle, their presence felt in every gust of wind and every beat of the war drums. Kelechi could feel their guidance, their strength flowing through him as he fought alongside his people. The battle raged on for days, but the people of Umuzi, united by a common cause, fought with a determination that surprised even their enemies. Just as it seemed that the battle would never end, a sudden shift occurred. The sky darkened and the air grew still. The ancestors, who had remained distant for much of the conflict, intervened. Their spirits filled the battlefield, their ethereal presence striking fear into the hearts of the invaders. The soldiers of Zuberi faltered, their will to fight broken by the sheer power of the other's might. Kelechi stood in awe as the spirits of his ancestors swirled around him, protecting the kingdom they had guided for generations. "This is our land," the ancestors seemed to say, "and it will not fall to the forces of greed and destruction again." The armies of Zuberi, realizing they could not defeat the combined strength of Umuzi and its ancestors, began to retreat. With the retreat of King Mwamba's forces, the people of Umuzi breathed a collective sigh of relief. The battle had been hard fought and many lives had been lost, but the kingdom had survived. Kelechi, though, knew that this victory was not just his. It belonged to the people of Umuzi, to the council, and to the ancestors who had protected them. As the kingdom began to rebuild once more, Kelechi sought to ensure that peace would last. He reached out to the neighboring kingdoms, extending a hand of friendship and unity. "We must learn from the past," he told them. "If we allow greed and ambition to rule us, we will destroy ourselves. But if we work together, we can create a future where all our people thrive." The story of the battle for Umuzi spread across the land, and soon other kingdoms began to take notice. The strength of Umuzi was not just in its defenses, but in its people, its ancestors, and its commitment to peace and unity. Neighboring kingdoms that had once eyed Umuzi with suspicion now sought alliances, eager to learn from the wisdom that had guided Kelechi through the darkest of times. Kelechi's reputation as a wise and compassionate leader grew, and he became a symbol of what a kingdom could achieve when guided by principles of unity, forgiveness, and the strength of its people. Umuzi flourished under, and the kingdom became a for those seeking peace in a troubled world. As Kelechi's leadership continued, he often returned to the sacred shrine to commune with the ancestors. Their guidance had been invaluable to him, and he never forgot the lessons they had taught him on his journey to free Dotun's soul. One evening, as the sun set over the kingdom, Kelechi knelt before the shrine and their final message. The wind whispered softly through the trees, and the ancestors spoke to him one last time. "You have done well, Kelechi," they said. "You have honored our legacy and brought peace to our land. Now the future belongs to the people of Umuzi. Guide them wisely, and they will thrive for generations to come." As the years passed, Kelechi knew that the time would come when he would have to pass on his leadership to the next generation. Council of Elders had grown strong, and the people of Umuzi were capable of leading themselves with wisdom and unity. Kelechi had taught taught them to value peace over greed and compassion over ambition. One day, as he stood before the council, Kelechi announced that he would be stepping down as leader, allowing the younger generation to take the reins. "I have done my part," he said, "but the future belongs to you now. Lead with wisdom and never forget the lessons of the past." Under the guidance of the new leaders, Umuzi continued to flourish. Kingdom had become a symbol of unity and strength, not through conquest but through cooperation and compassion. The alliances that Kelechi had forged with neighboring kingdoms remained strong, and the people of the land prospered in ways they had never imagined. Kelechi, though no longer leader, remained a respected elder, offering guidance and wisdom when needed. He watched with pride as the kingdom he had helped rebuild thrived, knowing that his work had been worthwhile. People of Umuzi continued to honor their ancestors, recognizing the role they had played in shaping the kingdom's destiny. The sacred shrine in the forest became a place of pilgrimage, where people from all walks of life came to seek guidance and offer thanks for the wisdom of those who had come before them. The ancestors, though no longer intervening in the affairs of the living, watched over the kingdom with pride. Kelechi's journey to free Dotun's soul had become legend, a story told to every generation as a reminder of the power of redemption, forgiveness, and unity. The legacy of the cursed prince had been transformed from one of betrayal to one of hope. The battle for Umuzi spread across the land, and soon other kingdoms began to take notice. The strength of Umuzi was not just in its defenses, but in its people, its ancestors, and its commitment to peace and unity. Neighboring kingdoms that had once eyed Umuzi with suspicion now sought alliances, eager to learn from the wisdom that had guided Kelechi through the darkest of times. Kelechi's reputation as a wise and compassionate leader became a symbol of what it achieved when guided by unity, forgiveness, of its people. People of Umuzi flourished under his leadership, and the kingdom became a beacon of hope for those seeking peace in a troubled world. As Kelechi's years of leadership continued, he often returned to the sacred shrine to commune with the ancestors. Their guidance had been invaluable to him, and he never forgot the lessons they had taught him on his journey to free Dotun's soul. One evening, as the sun set over the kingdom, Kelechi knelt before the shrine and asked for their final message. The wind whispered softly through the trees, and the ancestors spoke to him one last time. "You have done well, Kelechi," they said. "You have honored our legacy and brought peace to our land. Now the future belongs to the people of Umuzi. Guide them wisely, and they will thrive for generations to come." As the years passed, Kelechi knew that the time would come when he would have to pass on his leadership to the next generation. Council of Elders had grown strong, and the people of Umuzi were capable of leading themselves with wisdom and unity. Kelechi had taught them to value peace over greed and compassion over ambition. One day, as he stood before the council, Kelechi announced that he would be stepping down as leader, allowing the younger generation to take the reins. "I have done my part," he said, "but the future belongs to you now. Lead with wisdom and never forget the lessons of the past." Guidance of the new leaders, Umuzi continued to flourish. Kingdom had become a symbol of unity and strength, not through conquest but through cooperation and compassion. The alliances that Kelechi had forged with neighboring kingdoms remained strong, and the people of the land prospered in ways they had never imagined. Kelechi, though no longer leader, remained a respected elder, offering guidance and wisdom when needed. He watched with pride as the kingdom he had helped rebuild thrived, knowing that his work had been worthwhile. People of Umuzi continued to honor their ancestors, recognizing the role they had played in shaping the kingdom's destiny. The sacred shrine in the forest became a place of pilgrimage, where people from all walks of life came to seek guidance and offer thanks for the wisdom of those who had come before them. The ancestors, though no longer intervening in the affairs of the living, watched over the kingdom with pride. Kelechi's journey to free Dotun's soul had become legend, a story told to every generation as a reminder of the power of redemption, forgiveness, and unity. The legacy of the cursed prince had been transformed from one of betrayal to one of hope. As Kelechi grew older, he found himself spending more and more time in quiet reflection. He would often sit by the river that flowed through the heart of Umuzi, watching the water as it flowed peacefully past. He thought of all that had been accomplished, of the battles fought and won, and of the people he had met along the way. Though the journey had been difficult, Kelechi knew that every challenge had brought him closer to understanding the true meaning of leadership and wisdom. The lessons of the past had shaped the future, and he was content in the knowledge that Umuzi was stronger than it had ever been. One night, as Kelechi slept, he had a final dream. In the dream, he saw Prince Dotun standing before him, free from the stone curse that had bound him for so long. Dotun smiled at Kelechi, his face full of gratitude and peace. "Thank you," the prince said. "You gave me a second chance. You showed me that redemption is possible, even after the worst of betrayals." Kelechi smiled in return, knowing that Dotun's soul was finally at rest. The dream faded, but the feeling of peace remained with Kelechi as he woke. Prince's journey had ended, but the story of Umuzi continued. Kelechi lived a long and fruitful life, guiding the people of Umuzi with wisdom and compassion until his final days. When the time came for him to join the ancestors, the people of the kingdom gathered to honor him. His passing was a time of mourning, but also of celebration, for Kelechi had left behind a legacy that would endure for generations. People of Umuzi built a monument in his honor, a symbol of the wisdom and leadership that had brought the kingdom back from the brink of destruction. His name would be remembered alongside the ancestors, forever a part of the kingdom's history. With Kelechi gone, a new generation of leaders rose to guide Umuzi into the future. Kingdom remained strong, its people united by the values of compassion, humility, and unity that Kelechi had instilled in them. The stories of Dotun's redemption and Kelechi's journey continue to inspire those who sought to lead with wisdom and integrity. Council of Elders remained a central part of the kingdom's governance, ensuring that the lessons of the past were never forgotten. The ancestors, though no longer physically present, continued to guide the people in spirit, their legacy living on in the hearts and minds of the kingdom's citizens. As the sun set over the kingdom of Umuzi, the people looked to the future with hope and optimism. The kingdom had endured trials and tribulations, but through the strength of its people and the guidance of its ancestors, it had emerged stronger than ever. The spirit of Umuzi was eternal, its legacy one of redemption, unity, and the power of forgiveness. Kelechi's journey had ended, but the story of Umuzi was far from over. People of the kingdom carried the lessons of the past with them as they walked into the future, confident that they could face any challenge that came their way. And as the stars twinkled in the night sky, the ancestors watched over them, proud of all they had become.
If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more amazing tales. Join our growing community by subscribing and sharing your favorite part of today's story in the comments.
Yes, now work live streaming on. Okay, me recording. I'm on me, my man. Africa. Thank God, Kenya the Sana is on. Two people can have for full, and that is a year.